So here we are, Bike Chat 101 with Jonah Di Pasquale on the side here, and I'm Gunnar coming at you. And I guess we'll just get started.
Yeah, good evening. If you are just watching this on replay, thank you so much. Again, Bike Chat 101 Thursdays, 9:01 p.m., 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for those folks in Rochester, Minnesota. So we have a potential a guest at large. We're not sure if the folks from Resolute Bay Clothing will tune in, but they are more than welcome to grab a seat. And as always, Bike Chat is open to everyone. So please, if there is anything that you care to share your insights with or any questions, we are certainly here for you as well. Certainly not necessarily just about what Gunnar and I have to say, but about what you are interested in talking about. So let's get right into it. I know that last week was a great interview with Joe Graham of Graham Cycles. If you did not get a chance to check that out, we've got that available in a slurry of replays as well. You can check out Gunnar Soros's blog. He does have some information there. I also have it, I believe, on my YouTube channel, which you're welcome to subscribe to in addition. But as I said, Gunnar, if I'm not mistaken, I believe this week's episode we are going to be talking about cyclocross.
Yeah, that was my plan, was to just get into talking. I mean, it's fall going into winter, and it's typical cyclocross season. So I know that you do some cyclocross racing. Is that right? I actually haven't ever raced cyclocross, although I do participate in the practice races that we have here. Well, not so much this year, but usually most years. There's a small group of racers, and I'll go and join them on their practice. It's Tuesday night rides, I guess you could say. But they set up a little cyclocross course with barriers, and we go out and hit it, and it's good for them because they get to practice for race day, and I just get to go out and get my butt kicked by faster riders.
Cyclecross definitely is it seems to be the numbers and the interest are definitely growing as far as a segment in the cycling industry. I can certainly see a number of bike retailers beefing up their numbers over probably the past 5 to 6 years, and I think without question cyclocross certainly becomes more of a commonplace term. It's that is at least a flurry around the cycling community. So the question is, what is cyclocross? Cyclocross is, I've heard a lot of people refer to it as a combination of NASCAR racing and steeple chasing on bikes. Is there anything to do with tracks or horses? Absolutely not. This particular track or these particular courses are generally off-road. They do include some barricades, which are typical of the sport, some run-ups and those kinds of things, which means you will actually be dismounting your bike. Now, again, there are two types of races that you can get into or you can get yourself involved with. First and foremost, there are sanctioned races, which USA Cycling sanctions, and any of your local clubs will certainly be able to point you in the right direction. Of course, USA Cycling simply will help you to better find a local event near you. Secondly, then there is just the club-sponsored or shop-sponsored non-sanctioned ride. Those are certainly, very prevalent. I think that was originally really where the sport kind of took on its grassroots effect before really becoming a majorly accepted and sanctioned sport. So you are looking on average, the weekend sport can run you anywhere from, let's say, $35 to $45 and up. That is an average price, depends on your region. As I said, if you do get into an event that does require sanctioning, or it is a sanctioned event, if you do not have a license, they do provide a one-day license that allows you to race in that event. Now, if you are coming in as a citizen racer, just, again, not having a license, then they will just force you to usually just race what is called Cat 5. I guess for layman's terms, Cat 5 would just be kind of beginner. That whole kind of hierarchy, if you will, and I'm sure Gunnar, you're familiar with this, is it
Hmm.
actually goes Cat 5, Cat 4, Cat 3, Cat 2, Cat 1. So,
Right.
clearly if Gunnar was a Cat 1 and I was a Cat 5, we would be in two completely different levels of riding. Now, also with that, you would not necessarily be partnered up, in those respective fields. So all the Cat 5s would run and Cat 3s. But anyway,
Right.
so with that said, that's sort of a lot in terms of just what the event is. The bike, it's going to be a little bit more similar to a road bike, if you will. Biggest differentiations, certainly the geometry, not quite as tight or aggressive, I guess, as a road bike per se. Also, you'll find the front forks tend to be a little bit more relaxed or not quite as steep. They're a little bit more raked. Also, the bikes themselves traditionally were equipped with what is called the cantilever style brakes. However, certainly seems like the newer versions these days, even at the trickle down of the entry level, are now coming out with discs, which are amazing. I can say currently my bike just has cantilevers, which certainly do work well. But again, obviously being an avid mountain biker, I can tell you that I love my disc brakes. So
Right.
in terms of Gunner, you were talking about earlier about the practices. I want to talk about that. That is a really great way to, I guess, get your feet wet. Many
Oh yeah.
shops, many clubs have the practices. I guess for those folks in the audiences, I really want to kind of key in on that because I think that's a perfect segue to what we're talking about as far as the bike. So you have a local shop. They do these. I don't. I guess training rides is not really the exact term for it, or are they these separate training? I guess what would it be defined as, or is it
Right. I tend to call them just practice
practice?
races, only because, I mean, because there's, a training ride to me is you go out and you train, and it's very physical, which these are. But because of the skill involved, at least to me,
Right.
it seems like it's more of a practice. And
Mm-hmm.
because they're short courses, I mean, you're talking at the longest, it's like a mile long course.
Okay.
Usually they're a lot less than that.
Right.
And you're doing multiple laps, and someone says, okay, well, we're going to do half an hour, or we're going to do an hour, however many laps we can do in. It gives you the opportunity of, okay, well, I'm gonna gas it for the first 5 or 6 laps,
Right.
and then maybe I'm just going to work on cornering, or I'm going to work on dismounts, or I'm going to work on popping the barriers. It kind of allows you to kind of just do more of a practice type of thing,
Okay.
instead of like just on a road bike going out and training, and okay, we're just going to hammer this course and maybe hit this hill. Uh, it's to me, and that's kind of fun too. I think it's a lot more fun to do that way, because you can sit out a lap and grab your water bottle and drink and watch everybody go by, and then jump back in,
Right.
and it's kind of a fun way to not only get a little bit of competitive juices going, but just
Sure.
to see what's going on, and what is it.
Right.
I
Now,
see red flag Dan's in.
hey
Hi,
Dan.
Dan.
Hey Dan. Good evening. How are you doing? Good to see you. Yeah, and for the folks tuning in, Bike Chat 101 every Thursday, 9:01 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or 6 p.m. Pacific Time if you're in Rochester, Minnesota. Gunnar Soros doing a fantastic job at the helm, and of course myself, Jonah D. Pasquale. Thank you for your time, folks. So we're talking about cyclocross and cyclocross. Just as I said, as far as an entry point in terms of getting involved, I did a brief little rundown of the particular style of bike. It's a little bit different than
Mm-hmm.
a mountain bike per se, but one of the interesting points that I wanted to build off of your comment, Gunnar, which was great, is that these practice rides that the shops and the clubs have, you don't necessarily have to have a mountain a cyclocross bike per se. I mean, not
Oh, right, yeah.
every group, not every group is completely that regimented or strict. I think at the end of the day, they are happy to have somebody join their group on a bike. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, just so that we're very clear, this is cycling, this forum is about cycling. Cyclecross is just another means of being involved in the cycling community. Now,
Right.
as far as age groups, things like that, they have all categories, just as any normal road race, as Gunnar was referring to. But I do encourage the practice sessions so that you get an idea of seeing exactly what it is all about. I think it gets you to get over kind of the two left foots. I think that one of the biggest hangups that a lot of people have, they're like, okay, well, I'm just gonna dust off my good old bike in the garage and ride it around the block, and when I'm done riding it, I put it back in the garage. I mean, nobody's like, I'm gonna stop, get off my bike, run, jump back on my bike, those kinds of things. I'm gonna
Right.
carry my bike. So what we mean by that is the aspect of cyclocross where you actually are doing that. They have a couple series of barricades where you can hop over them. I mean, certainly some of the more skilled riders like Jeremy Powers and Adam Meyerson, and Danny Somerville are probably more than capable of doing that. However, it's a little bit of it's a crapshoot. You're either gonna make it or you're not, and some riders are actually much quicker at dismounting and getting back on and off your bike, which is part of the practice. And then another part of some of the courses, they do have what are called as run ups, where in theory you may be able to ride up the hill, or whatever part of the course is, but sometimes, again, if you're in a tight group, it actually, well, first of all, it may not be possible to ride up the hill in a group, but it may be faster to just dismount, run up, and get back on. I can tell you that it is very cardio intense. There you go, nice.
Yeah.
I mean, it goes, and there's the image right there. That's if you're looking at Gunnar's screen right there, it's two riders. They're running up, and again, run ups could be any combination of things. Yeah, they could be steps, they could be, whatever. But I think the reality of it is the practice sessions. Red flag Dan, can you do this on a road bike? No, you definitely cannot do it on a road bike. Two reasons for that is that typically the courses themselves, they will generally have a mix of particular surface areas, primarily grass. Some of the more sanctioned events may have sand traps, those kinds of things. It's definitely not quite a as aggressive of a course of, for example, like riding a mountain bike off road. But
Right.
two things. Number one, Dan, great question, by the way, in regards to specifics of being able to use a road bike. The tires are way too small. The wheels are usually not that robust to handle that kind of punishment. And lastly, the brakes. The brakes are very small, very side pull. There's just absolutely no clearance there, and you just it would be a no go. I mean, you literally, if the course was even remotely, loose or muddy, you'd be just not having much fun. So, yeah,
Right.
that is a question. I
And
mean, again,
just
go
to
ahead.
just to get in on that too, there have been people that have ridden road bikes in cyclocross, but generally, if there's, like what Jonah was saying, if there's any sort of mud, it's not going to work. And then if there's any sort of if it's a real hard pack, and maybe even grass courses, I've seen riders, and I want to say I even tried it out once on my road bike. But like he said, the probably the biggest issue is the clearance for tires, because usually you want a wider tire to be able to handle the off-road bits. Um, Even if it's hard pack or just grass, there's going to be times where you're just not going to get traction with a narrow tire, and so you need to be able to run at least probably a 30C tire. Um, and so most modern road bikes don't have the clearance for it. Although I have seen too, if you have, I mean, if someone gets their hands on a 1970s to early 80s road bike that was originally designed for 27-inch wheels, and you put in 700C wheels and the brakes still reach, then you actually have enough clearance to probably put a 32C cyclocross tire on there. So if the bike is what's holding you back, maybe wait for a really clear day and show up and just see what happens. Because I don't think, at least for the practice races, at least where I'm at, we're not going to keep somebody from riding because they have the wrong bike. I do it on a mountain bike because that's what I got. And actually, I've done it on my. I do have an older fixed gear road bike that has clearance for 30C tires that I tried riding cyclocross practice races with, and that worked out fine. Obviously, I wasn't able to keep up with the geared guys, but cyclocross is kind of interesting too in that it's kind of like the gravel bike movement right now, where it's almost like, okay, whatever bike you have, at least for practice. I'm not talking about sanctioned races, but practice races. And here in the Midwest, we also have they call them bandit cross, where it's just kind of a group of people that get together and say, hey, we're going to have a race this weekend near the bar in this junkyard or whatever. And people show up and you just ride what you got and nobody cares. It's just a good time. So just wanted to jump in on that too. So don't let the lack of bike keep you from, if it seems like something that would be interesting, from trying it. Now, obviously, if it's wet and muddy, then you will definitely be at a disadvantage. But I've seen worse too. So
yeah, no, absolutely. And again, to your point about the the muddy trails and things like that, that's those are, believe it or not, more of the ideal types of conditions that riders look for. Now, as I said, if you're seeing pictures of these dry, buffed out courses, that's not very typical of what the traditional
but
cyclocross
yeah,
mentality was around.
exactly.
And for those folks just tuning in to Bike Chat, as I said, thank you for watching. The key with cyclocross was typically, out of the fact that the road riding season was over, and the athletes wanted, and the riders wanted to still stay in shape and still have fun, and things, obviously the weather started deteriorating. I mean, they really just started cobbling bikes together with spare parts, and making just these Franken bikes, if you will, to race off road. Now, again, fast forward to 2015. I mean, you're certainly not going to see any type of Franken bikes on the course. I mean, it's still, a potential, entry for a race. But my point is that, you've seen the price of these bikes come down to be much, much more affordable, and you can get, I mean, a decent cross bike for probably about $800. You may be able to get it a little bit less, but I feel like at that price range, you're getting something that is a decent quality. And lastly, if you don't want to ride or do anything of a cyclocross nature, you can just simply put tires on it and make it into a commuter.
Right.
And ironically, that was really what the hybrid of the cyclocross bike, definitely stemmed from. I mean, a lot of people are using, they were doing a lot of like pack biking, those kinds of things. They needed panniers, and those bikes, were definitely a lot more robust. Which is really where some of the original, cross bikes came from. They were, very burly 4130 chromoly, and they were heavy, but boy, you really could put them through the motions, because the road bikes of that era were very, I don't want to say lightweight, but the tubing was just so supple that it would be compromised even if any type of really aggressive riding was being put onto it other than road. So,
Right.
as I said, with that said, to your point about choice of bike, absolutely. I mean, and I feel like race promoters these days, they get it. We just had, about a month ago, we had a UCI cross race in town, Ellison Cross, which was very well attended. At any rate, there was a good number of riders that just decided to do it on a mountain bike, and
Mm-hmm.
I think it's to your point. It isn't necessarily people feel like they have to buckle into the pressure of going out to buy a cross bike. I think, as a promoter, again, back to what we were saying before, is the more people they see on the course with numbers on their backs, the better.
Right.
And that's really one of the nice things about cyclocross. If you've not tried it before, it's generally around the fall type season. Certainly the more hardcore races go through till January, I think into February, believe it or not,
Mm-hmm.
where the actual World Cup championships are and whatnot, which is insane because at that point I'm thinking snowboarding or any type
Right.
of winter activity that clearly does not involve riding in lycra.
Right. No, yeah. It's
So
it is amazing that they and you're out there for a while in that weather. Red flag Dan says, "Can you ride a cross bike on gravel?" Oh yeah. In fact, a lot of a lot of the current gravel bikes nowadays started off as cyclocross bikes, um, and it gave people a reason to ride them in the summer. Uh, and some of the so traditional cyclocross bikes um, would have a slightly higher bottom bracket, and they kind of didn't handle very well. But then as the races progressed, and I think partially because of mountain biking also, the geometries kind of changed. And in some respects, modern cyclocross bikes, although they're a little more relaxed than a road bike, their bottom bracket height is about the same as a road bike. And so the handling on them is great, especially for gravel, because you have this kind of stable platform that you can kind of corner more confidently on gravel. So they're definitely and then now bike companies are kind of promoting them as gravel specific bikes. But cyclocross and gravel bikes nowadays are pretty much interchangeable. I'd say if you can ride a cyclocross bike, you can ride it on gravel, or if you somehow get a gravel bike, then you can use that for cyclocross too. So
right. Yeah,
good
absolutely.
question there.
Again, another great question. And typically, that's exactly to Gunnar's point. That really is, without question, that exact same bike. I think that like any category of bikes, gravel can certainly get sliced into or pigeonholed into a number of different bikes. I mean, I think typically when most people think gravel, they think more along the line of kind of that point to point race or scramble or whatever. However, you do get the people that are heavily into bike packing and touring and again to Gunner's point, it's exactly that same thing. I mean, you're gonna find the exact same capabilities of a cross bike as a gravel bike, and honestly, if you really want to split hairs, I think the capacity to which the gravel bike really had the rack capabilities is all. I think you can
Right.
find, again, Dan, a gravel bike would certainly have front rack adapters on the fork dropouts, which you probably won't find on a cross bike. A gravel bike, you're definitely going to find, much more taller upright stems, adjustable. Also, definitely, I think a wider handlebar with different hand positionings. Clearly again, a different saddle, and definitely a different gear ratio for sure. Because if you
Right.
have somebody that's not trying to push gears for a race or a time, then in that case, you're going to be, obviously hauling a bike with additional weight on it. In some cases, you could be carrying, another 50 pounds, which is a lot. I mean, I don't know how crazy people get with bike packing. I don't think I want to carry more than 50 pounds, but at any
Yeah.
rate, but yeah, no, that's a great question. And as I said, the gravel category is I still believe in its infancy. I mean, I could say probably early to late last year's when gravel really became fully PC across the board where people knew it, and then all of a sudden you saw at Eurobike and Interbike. Just a
Hmm.
huge introduction of like quote unquote the gravel category. And again, I think it's been, um, you know, widely used from one end of the spectrum to the other, meaning from entry level to advanced. I don't necessarily, is there an advanced gravel bike? Probably not. I think it's more what the bike's spec'd out with, which comes back down to what your budget is again.
Right, right,
Knowing what you're going to be using the bike for all the time.
right. Although, too, the cyclocross specific bikes, when you get into the purebred race machines, a lot of them you probably wouldn't want to use for gravel racing because some of those don't even have water bottle mounts. So it's there's that consideration. So um, there's versatility wise, not not top of the line purebred race cyclocross bike would be a little bit more uh, able to be used for a variety of things, like Jonah was saying, for commuting, for uh, touring, for gravel rides. But when you get into the pure, thoroughbred race carbon machines, a lot of times kind of like a regular road bike too, they pull off the rack mounts, they pull off anything that could be considered extra. And on cyclocross, they don't have water bottle mounts because in at least in the pro ranks, you can have a pit area where you have multiple bikes with a mechanic, and you just switch bikes if it becomes damaged or if it becomes caked with mud and the tires can't go. You just ride into the pits and switch bikes, and then they wash off the other bike while you're riding on a new bike. So um, there's no need for water bottles because you just get a feed from the side. The course is so short that you could, if you miss it one lap, you just come around the next time and grab a bottle also. So there's that to kind of consider. Although I don't think I'll be shopping for a thoroughbred cyclocross bike anytime soon.
Right, and that's a great point, Dan. And according to Cyclecross magazine, on average, they listed about 11 different bikes. For example, Specialized Tri-AS Works, Rock Lobster, English, Specialized, Redline, Ridley, X-Night, Rock Lobster, at any rate, Bianchi Cross. My point to you is, as on average, with these roughly 10 or 11 bikes that they looked at for weight, was about 17 pounds. 17 to,
Wow.
we really say 17 to 18 pounds. Now, that's pretty light. As far as bike weights for those, again, kind of out there in layman's terms going, well, I don't know what 17. It's light, but what the point that Gunner's making, again, that also isn't necessarily something that you're going to really want to ride on gravel. Again, previously in another life as a rep for a manufacturer, I did actually take, a quote unquote road bike on a gravel road. And, it can be done, but the ride is it's just terrible. It's so terrible. Because the bikes are so, they're so stiff. They're not very compliant at all. And when you're dealing with again, let's call it what it is, a loose, granular, gravelly surface area, it can be very difficult to keep the bike tracking, to keep the bike moving. Turning and cornering is especially dangerous as well. So, again, can it be done? Of course. Do you really need to have, some saddle time on your bike to be able to comfortably do that without any injury? Absolutely. So, again, the latter part of that is what we were saying, about bike choice is if you have a mountain bike, use your mountain bike. But if you want to invest into, either a gravel or a cross bike, first of all, most average consumers, I wouldn't recommend buying a high end pro bike. First of all,
No, yeah.
there's way too much money. And, one of the things that people don't realize, which is I think a huge issue across the board, is everybody wants the same bike that the pros ride, and I think that's all fine and good. If you certainly have the ability to purchase those bikes, go for it. But one of the things that people don't realize is that when those high end parts that are on that bike break, they need to be replaced with high end parts. It's like if you buy a Mercedes SL, SL, and you smash the door in, you can't put the door of a Ford Escort on the car. You have to
Right.
put the original parts. And again, obviously there's, yes, there's some tolerance there, but what I'm trying to say is that if you are a professional sponsored athlete and you have a quiver of three or four of the same bikes, it doesn't matter. But if you are like most folks right here on this forum and watching now replay, thank you again, by the way, you have the one and the one purpose workhorse that does it all. So you're riding it on the pathways, you're riding it to the to the store, the coffee shop, and throwing it into a citizens race on the weekend. So it's really important to know that when you're buying a bike, and you'll save a ton of money in the long run too. By the way. All right, so we've to quickly recap, we talked about Cyclecross. As I said, this is Bike Chat every Thursdays, 9:01 p.m., 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Anello Grande, aka Gunnar Soros, and myself, Jonah Pasquale. We're so grateful for your time. We did talk about some good suggestions for bikes and what worked. Thank you to Red Flag Dan for tuning in. Had a few folks jump in and jump out, which we can understand on a Thursday night right before Halloween. It could be something a lot of people have going on as well. But in terms of overall fitness and actual preparation as far as getting ready to do an event, again, just like any event, good rules of thumb as far as being prepared is get there early, get to the event early. If you can pre-register for the event, that's also a great way to get yourself mentally prepared, because I'm racing on Sunday, November 1st at Cross in the Park. But my point is that just waking up the morning of and deciding that you're going to race, it could it happen, yeah, but I mean you're just you're mentally fried. I mean, you're trying to scramble to get your stuff together. What's the weather going to be like? What, am I going to eat? Do I need any nutrition? What am I going to wear after the race, or whatever. But get there early. That's important. Obviously make sure your bike is tuned up properly. At least a week in advance. I mean, the night before doesn't usually work.
Yeah.
But I like as far as myself, when I'm gonna be racing, yeah, as I mentioned, be pre-registered, be ready to go. Again, I always like my trick is I kind of call it the race bin. I have like an oversized Tupperware bin, that has an extra pair of shoes. It's got garbage bags in it. I've got gloves. I've got extra short. I mean, it's again it's the mentality with pack like you need it, even though you don't need it. And the great thing about it is it fits conveniently into the trunk of my car. I take it out. I'm ready to go. And I'm also talking about things like like a towel, like a jug of water. Again, if it's raining, well, you got to think about that as well. I mean, not everybody has a pop-up tent, so you do need to kind of think about that. I've even had I've kept a tarp in my car where I've used those orange clips to my trunk and tied them off and made like a little, weird little canopy type thing. As I
Right.
said, you certainly need to prepare for those elements. I mean, obviously, if it's just a freaking tsunami, then of course don't race. But you will run into foul weather when you're racing cyclocross. That much I can guarantee you. And
Oh
part
yeah.
of this preparedness is exactly that. As far as the actual course itself, you want to make sure that you at least at a minimum walk the course. If you feel that it is too squishy, or the terrain is, I don't want to say adverse, but if you really feel like you don't have the time to completely re unmuck your bike and tune it back up again, then walk the course. But I think it's very important that you walk the course to get an idea of what you're up against. We talked about the obstacles, the barriers, whatever the case is, but also to understanding where the course goes. I mean, typically with most of your better events, they will actually have a taped course, and obviously what that means, you need to stay within the tape. I mean, if you break out of the tape, are you going to be disqualified? No, not necessarily, but I mean, the whole theory of the course is you need to stay within the parameters of where the course is taped off. Now, if you have a little bit more, a skill level, and you've been out a few times, and we're probably talking to some folks that are intermediates. Well, at this point, if you do have the ability and the funds to have a pit bike, that's awesome. Then you'd be going out there and riding. You'd be riding on your trainer bike or your pit bike, and then when it's race time, you can jump onto your regular bike. Also, if you're Mr. and Mrs. Fancy Pants, you have an extra set of really nice carbon awesomeness wheels, which would be great.
Nice. Yeah.
When if for some reason you happen to have an issue, you don't have to change a flat; you just change a tire. But as I said, those are definitely some things that help. And again, most importantly, again, getting there early, being able to do these things, being able to kind of just not be rushed into it, you'll have a much better experience. I typically like to give myself some time to just kind of zone out and just if the weather's nice, kind of just go for a little quick short ride. I'll do some tempo stuff. I'll ramp up, ramp down, and obviously, some earbuds and some good music that gets you in the mood is helpful. I've even gone as far as bringing my trainer with me, kind of setting it up under a tree and just kind of warming up that way. That's another way to kind of get ready. But you definitely don't want to roll up to the line just like you've been sitting down chugging a Coca-Cola, because that just doesn't work.
Right.
You're gonna well, you certainly have the potential to hurt yourself, but I mean it's it's just like getting shocked. You know what I mean? If you're sitting
Right.
there resting and you go from resting to like a full tilt sprint, I mean, you're
Right.
obviously
Well, and that's it. Yeah. The starts are basically like a sprint for the first, I don't know, half a lap or until you hit the, if there's a single track section, then until the single track or the first barriers. And oftentimes it's a sprint for the first lap or 2 laps. And then once the field is kind of spread out, then sometimes things settle down and you kind of get into a little bit of a zone. But you got to watch for the attacks and stuff. So
right.
yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. And that's another thing about the race itself. There's definitely some strategies or tactics, if you will, that come with experience, with paying attention, with obviously doing a number of races. There's a whole there's a whole playbook of different approaches of how to win a cyclocross race. And um, to me, just the biggest variable is you in the game you're playing in your head. I mean, I feel like, do I care whether or not you make the podium or I make the podium? Yeah, it's great to get the hardware, but I always, I don't know if you've seen this shirt, or our audience out there is, I'm maybe last, but I'm ahead of the guy sitting on the couch. You know what I mean?
right.
Or whatever that saying is. And I think that is probably, without question, one of the biggest call to actions of why the audience out there would want to consider taking it, into account to try a cyclocross event, because I feel like it's still, to me, really kind of embraces sort of the grassroots of cycling, kind of like, again, snowboarding was back in the day, where, like, people didn't care how old you were, what kind of board you rode, what kind of riding you were into. They just saw that you were a snowboarder, and they were just psyched because you were another snowboarder. I believe, and again, Gunnar, I don't know if you agree or disagree, but I feel like that still is a very very prevalent vibe that I get when I go to cross races, which is definitely what keeps me coming back for sure.
Right. Right. no, there's definitely that vibe to it that um, they're just happy that there's other people, and it. I don't know about where you're at, but it seems like uh, the cross races here have kind of a party atmosphere, um, where they kind of, I don't want to say they encourage heckling, but good-natured heckling is somewhat, I guess it is kind of encouraged, to yell at riders as they're going by, and not necessarily to be mean, but to be like, come on, you can go faster, you can catch that guy in front of you. And definitely lots of cowbells and all kinds of encouragement, and even drinking and food, and food trucks generally show up, and they're a blast to go to, and just kind of, even if you're not racing, they're great to go to and take pictures and just kind of soak in the atmosphere.
Definitely, that's awesome. Yeah, no, that's a great point, and I think like anything, the best part of it is certainly the finish. And now when we talk about the finish, one of the unique aspects of cyclocross really is that bell lap. I mean, everybody kind of probably remembers the Saturday night's skit, more cowbell.
Yeah,
That bell really, what that means is it is essentially the last lap. So, Gunnar, you were talking about strategy and how to win the race. I would say probably at this point, most of the key riders are at the front of the group, and at this point, it's just down to maybe a few seconds. In some cases, I've seen complete walkaways, but the Bell app is really usually where you kind of, if you got any last bit of carbon in the tank, you kind of blow it out, because you just
oh
got
yeah,
one more lap, and you're done. And I've heard Bell app, and yeah, the good Dan, Red Flag Dan, the goal is always to finish running, biking. Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, that's a great point, Red Flag Dan. The good news is when you do hear that bell, for the Bell app, you know that in one lap it's over, depending on how
right.
far you're suffering. And I've been there, and I will say to you that if you have not experienced cyclocross race, definitely try it, because it's very intense. I mean, it really is. I mean, you certainly can scale it back to the level of fitness that you're at, obviously. But again, that Gunnar, you mentioned it earlier, that first, you know, quarter lap, lead lap, or whatever it is probably without question the most, I'd say, critical part of the event, because if you're racing in a larger field, let's say 70 riders, you don't want to be fighting your way through, a large group of people, because it can be challenging. And you got to remember, to catch the lead riders of the lead group, I mean, you got to work 2 and 3 times harder to not
Right.
only overcome riders, but to still maintain your pace, and not make minor calculated errors, like tripping over your own feet, or
Yeah.
kicking your pedal, or shinning yourself, which sucks, by the way.
Right.
So those are all key factors that make that experience work. But otherwise, I think, if you've not tried cyclocross, I mean, I would highly, highly, highly encourage doing it. And even those club rides that you mentioned, I think are just a phenomenal way to get involved with that, because you'll find that the shop people, and even just the participants like yourself, are just great with handing out all the freebies for advice. You know what I
Right.
mean? And that's, and I tell people, I mean, it's just like learning. It's just like trying out to become a snowboard instructor. It's like, even if you don't make the cut to be a snowboard instructor, you get plenty of free training and advice in the process that makes you a better snowboarder, right? So it's the same thing with these like show and go practice sessions. You show up at the practice session, and you see somebody hopping off and hopping on their bike like a gazelle. I mean, you could approach them and say, hey, how do I do this, or how do you do that, or what's the timing, or watch me try this, and can you give me some feedback? And that makes a huge difference, with your ability to buy into the sport and want to do it.
Right.
So that's a great point.
No. And also, and so while we're talking about those practice laps, I kind of want to just real briefly touch upon. So in cyclocross racing, they have barriers that you're supposed to hop over, and they're usually made up of what are they? A couple of 2x6s or 2x8s stacked on top of each other, and they're solid wood, and they're great for the races because you're forced to either dismount and carry your bike and hop over them, or if you're really good, you can bunny hop your bike over over the barriers. Usually in practice races, usually kind of figure out a way to make barriers, and a lot of times the easiest way is people build PVC pipe barriers. And the great thing about those is that you can practice bunny hopping them without too much fear of crashing. So, and yeah, thanks for putting up that link for building barriers, because they're great. I built a couple myself just to practice in the backyard, just to be able to hop off and on, and then to practice actually bunny hopping. And so when you do mess up and not make it over on a bunny hop, you're not hitting a couple of 2x4s stuck together on top of each other and going over the bars. You can, just kind of roll right over the PVC pipe and it'll fall over. And the worst thing is you have to pick it back up. And so that's, I guess, another thing is that in these practice races, if we're using PVC barriers for practice barriers, usually the general accepted rule is if you knock it over, you have to stop and pick it up before the next rider comes by. So you might lose time in your practice race, but you're doing that so that the next person still has the barrier up. But yeah, so barriers, PVC pipe, Cyclecross magazine has how to build them. And I think that's the actual link that I used a year or two ago to build mine. So
Right.
Good stuff.
Yeah, no, that definitely is a good point to make, and I think a lot of folks out there, can appreciate that. As I said, I don't find I don't find bunny hopping to be not 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 unhelpful, but to your point is that there's definitely a penalty to pay if it doesn't go well. That's kind
Right.
of
Yeah.
the best way to put that. I mean, I've duffed my bottom bracket and I've duffed my wheel plenty of times to do that. And it looks like we got a new somebody new coming in here. Looks like Aya Lewis.
Hey, how
Lewis
you
is
doing
joining.
today?
Lewis got the nice little cog there. Good welcome. Seat is open if you wish to join us. Thank you. Hello, hello. You are watching Bike Chat. Myself, Joan DiPasquale, as well as host Gunnar Soros. We are here every Thursday, 9:01 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we scope about cycling and cycling-related aspects. This evening's session was about cyclocross, and right now we are talking about barriers and bunny hopping and just some of the other aspects that make the sport or the activity of cyclocross so appealing.
Right. Well, and besides barriers, so there's other obstacles besides the barriers, and I'm sure you've seen it before, Jonah. Steps or run-ups, and then what's another one? Steps, run-ups, and sand pits. Yeah, sand pits. Yeah. Oh, I don't like sand pits. Not that I can't ride through them, but just my only issue with sand pits is just the idea of sand going up on my drivetrain and then turning into a gritty mess. But that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I've watched a couple races recently where they have actually had a pretty big section of the course actually going on the shorelines of like a beach, and I'm just thinking to myself,
oh yeah,
oh my god, that poor bike's bottom bracket and drivetrain is getting thrashed.
right. Yeah. Not always fun, but they throw them in there, and I guess traditionally in Belgium, cyclocross, they always have big sand pits, so that's what they do. But I've noticed lately, so generally the stair steps, they've been building them where they're like just about a bike length to 1.5 bike lengths apart. And I don't know if you've seen some of the videos, but there are people that stay not seated, but stay on the bike, and instead of getting off and running up, actually use like a pump skill to get up these stair steps and maintain a speed going up. So they're not losing any speed by staying on the bike, where usually you would see that.
Yeah, there's a good little clip right there that I just popped out. You may want to
Oh yeah.
This is pretty
Yeah.
epic, right?
Yeah. I think that's one of the ones. Yeah. So yeah, it's amazing, and takes some amazing pump skills to be able to do that. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and again, I can tell you that without question, I can confidently do that on my mountain bike. But when you actually get onto a cyclocross bike that is much larger, narrower wheels, it's definitely a lot harder. I mean, even though
Mm-hmm.
the bike's definitely lighter, but that is another reason for the benefit of somebody who's sitting there listening about cyclocross, saying, wait a minute, I have some friends that maybe do it, or I'm thinking about giving it a try. Practice sessions will totally address that. How many rims got broken? Yeah. Well,
Right. Yeah.
that's a great point. I mean, I think that Red Flag Dan, he's obviously saying that looked easy. Yeah. I mean, well, if you're a pro, I would hope so.
Right.
Cody
If
Kaiser
you're racing at that level, yeah.
Cody Kaiser is just he's been just dominating podiums, I think, all season long. So he's a very strong young rider. But rims, yes and no. I think that the quality of the wheel sets and rims that are out there, I think it's pretty rare. I mean, usually with cyclocross, believe it or not, you're not actually running very, very high pressure. So
Right.
that's another point that Lewis was asking, is typically you'll I mean, for a good reason, you'll flat first before you damage the wheel and the rim. In fact, I can't tell you how many countless flats that I've got on my cross bike. Although I definitely have dinged my rim, but that was like one out of like several flats. You follow me? Not several flats in a row, but
Right.
to damage a rim, you really have to hit something pretty significant. And
Right.
usually to the topic of what we're talking about, with these courses and how they're laid out, I mean, are there challenges? Are there going to be some questionable surface areas that you need to ride on? Absolutely. But is it anything that's going to be so damaging to your drivetrain or your bike that they would allow you to race on it? Probably not. And of course you really can't factor out operator error, but most of the courses that I've raced on, it's been very unlikely that would happen.
Right. Well, and two, a lot of times, especially like in Cody's situation, when you're racing at that level, you're usually racing on, they're called tubular tires, and the rims are actually different, and they're actually a lot harder to ding. So mainly because it's kind of a box section rim without the hooks that catch a normal clincher tire. So the tires are actually glued on to like a flat bottom on the rim, and so they generally don't get dinged as much. In addition to being able to run at even a lower pressure than even like tubeless tires, and you actually have the ability to run them flat because they're glued onto the rim. Even if they run flat, you can still get traction on them. So Probably not as if it was me and I was running regular rims and hitting the rims on the steps like that, I'd probably be putting some dings in it.
Yeah.
But at his level and running the equipment he's got, I'm sure he's not even worried about it. I'm sure the bike survived just fine.
Yeah. Right.
Um,
Yeah. No, and that's probably going to be something that you may aspire to be able to do after I would say probably a season or two or more. It takes a lot of time in the saddle and bike handling skills to be able to do that. And I think the other thing too is you probably don't want to set the bar so ridiculously high when you do your first cross race. I think I always say to people, you just, I mean, you got to be in it just for the experience of doing that. I Lewis had a question that said it's different when you don't buy theirs. Oh yeah, no, I Lewis had to.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, as far and that just kind of closes out what we were previously talking about the wheels. Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's the other thing too about most consumers. They know that. I mean, if I'm not sponsored or Gunner's not sponsored, and we don't have a sag vehicle with replacement wheels, yeah, I'm not gonna go and
right. I'm not going to ride up the steps like that for
no.
fear of damaging. Yeah,
Yeah, no way. But yeah, that's an absolutely valuable point. So as I said, I mean, those are definitely some things that you want to take into consideration about cyclocross. I mean, it's very fun. I think the other nice thing too, again, obviously, Gunnar, you have a child, I have kids. It's very family friendly. I feel like
hmm
the races themselves, you can bring your family, you can bring your kids. For example, many of the races here in upstate New York, they have a free kids race, which is nice. So, if I bring my daughter, and she doesn't want to hang around and be bored out of her mind, I mean, she may do the race, and of course they're smart. They give every finisher some kind of water bottle with candy in it or something like that. But I think
right.
that is, as I said, one of the nice things that gets me back to why cyclocross. I feel that it is still one of those grassroots core activities that dad can do or mom can do or dad and mom can do and the kids can be part of it.
Right.
To your point about even just being a spectator, I've you know I'll admit it, man. I've grabbed a growler from my local brew house and I've just grabbed my backpack and went down and just heckled people. It's been a blast. I mean, everybody's a
Yeah.
good sport about it. In fact, this weekend in Buffalo, I'll be announcing for Cross in the Park, and there's an actual little race mojo called Spirit Pony, and it's like a little whatever My Pretty Pony head on a pole, and they put like dollar bills in it or whatever, and they do hand nuts
Nice.
to the riders. That's definitely one of the things I can say about the Buffalo marketplace. I don't know if my friends from Campus Wheelworks that are watching in the Buffalo area, they're putting the race on this weekend. My good friend Ethan, they totally get into it. There was a Halloween race this past Sunday, and he dressed up as Marilyn Monroe, which is pretty funny. And another and then another one of his coworkers dressed up as Elliot from ET. He had like the red
Oh,
hoodie.
nice.
He put like a blue milk crate on his bike, and then a little ET doll. It's great.
Awesome.
Um,
Red Flag Dan's asking if there's cyclocross courses around here. It's besides the practice races, there's an actual cyclocross series up in the Twin Cities area, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and some of the surrounding things up there. There hasn't actually been like an actual cyclocross race closer to Rochester, probably in about 10 years at least.
right.
Um, which unfortunately or fortunately, I think is just that we haven't had a club in town host a race. But because of the population up in Minneapolis, St. Paul, there's definitely, and probably just about every weekend through the fall,
Right.
there will be cyclocross races up there. So definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing too. red flag, Dan, is just, go to an event and just check it out. Because I think if you go and at least just get an idea of what it's all about, I think that you'll be a little bit more mentally prepared to give it a shot and check it out. I feel like that's usually our human nature to sort of get like a little bit of a lay of the land before we get involved. Or, if you're just like, some people that are out there, they just dive in head first. They enter the race, they go, they do it, and they have fun. And I got to be honest with you. One of the best things about racing cyclocross is just cracking a beer after with all your fellow buds that you've been racing with. And that gets me back to that culture, that lifestyle. They're like, yeah, I could do this every day. I mean, clearly, I'm not capable of doing that, but I think that the reality of it is, with these events being almost every weekend, with these events being very minimal as far as a hit to the wallet, and being family friendly, and not being very far for a drive, to Gunner's point. I mean, can you obviously drive 3 and 4 hours for a cross race? Of course you can, but I think the premise of these events is just, it's like, hey, something to do on my bike to get a good workout and hang out with my family. That's what I would say cyclocross is all about, for sure.
Right, right. Well, and the sanctioned events, when you're speaking of family, they are great for if you do have a family or if you have a spouse that but still wants to support you,
Right.
because it's such a short course and it's multiple laps. Anybody that you bring will see you racing multiple times, whereas on a traditional road bike race or mountain bike race, they may see you at the start, the finish, and maybe 1 or 2 laps around. On cyclocross, because the course is so short, and they say, okay, well, we're going, I think usually it's like 45 minutes for a race. Mm-hmm. So it's short. So it's like 45 minutes. And then it's multiple laps. So in 45 minutes, you may be able to do 10 laps. So they get to see you going around 10 laps. They get to kind of cheer you on and just kind of get into that spirit. Rush Miller says, cross is one of the only pure sports left for amateurs. Great sport. Yeah, and it's like what Jonah was saying. It has its grassroots to it too. So like I was telling Dan earlier that, yeah, there's no sanctioned cyclocross races here in Rochester, but occasionally some of the people that are into it will put on what is occasionally called bandit cross, or just, either practice cyclocross races or an actual cyclocross race, but without any sponsorship or any backing from anybody other than, hey, let's all get together and have cyclocross for, this Saturday evening, and we'll all get together. And so it still has that vibe to it. Come to Colorado, Rush Miller says. Nice. Would love to get out to Colorado.
Yeah, and the Rush Miller Foundation, by the way, their claim to fame is they're putting blind, visually impaired kids on tandem bikes. Very cool.
Nice. Yeah.
Dig hearing about BVI Tech. Well, Rush Miller, please. This is a great opportunity to give you the power of Bike Chat. We'd love to have you jump in. There's an open seat for you. All right, there we go. Come on down.
Hey, man, what's up?
How's it going?
God, I am loving Blab. I'm getting a lot of blub from being on Blab. I was on 2 Blabs at once in different things. Wow. And then I was scrolling down and I'm excited to see some subjects like cycling and things. And I love cyclocross. I've only actually been in a couple of the races, but a lot of my friends are doing cyclocross. Cyclecross bike is the only bike I've actually had a vivid dream about, but I love cycling, and it's changed my life. And our foundation, my son had brain cancer 15 years ago.
Okay.
And lost his vision. And so 14 years ago, we started our Rush Miller Foundation to put blind, low vision kids on bicycles. And we've helped about 2,300 kids ride a bike for the first time through some different programs of ours. We've donated in 42 states and 8 countries. And So we thank you. And actually, that's our old website. I've got a new WordPress site that's built. I just haven't had it go active, and that site will be going down in a couple of days because I didn't pay the whatever where it's served at. And thank you for doing that, because now it reminds me I got to make the WordPress site active. But cycling is such a powerful. People think of a bike as a piece of metal, but it really is magical in a lot of ways. And whether it's hand cycling for a paraplegic, or cyclocross, or God, is there any feeling better than being in a peloton or being in a pace line where you're with the wind and all you hear is that chain grinding? I mean, God, there's nothing like it. And it's or back going single track on a mountain bike. I just did the Monarch Crest Trail in Colorado, where most of it's over 12,000 feet. And the people that are really into cycling, you don't have to, there's already kind of that undercurrent. It's like having been in the military, people in the military kind of have this brotherhood. Same thing with cycling, the people that really, where it's in their soul. And cyclocross, I think, is still the closest now to that pure, sport feel of cycling. Well, with the Tour de France and all the pros, all the criticism that's come from that, but you don't have that so much in cyclocross. And you're right. I think, Jonah, you said it right. You have this great race. Everybody can watch your race. Your friends can watch your race. Everybody, and I think Gunnar, you were saying it too. It's a family thing, and then afterwards you get to drink a beer, which is the best, right?
Right. It is. Yeah, I mean, it tastes the best too afterwards. It's really gave it your all. It's like, oh my gosh, that's the best tasting beer I've ever had.
Right. Thank God for microbreweries and cyclocross. It's the purest of the pure.
Oh yeah, totally. Well, and while you're talking about that, we also do another Blab on Tuesday nights about craft beer. So I mean, come on Tuesday nights, talk about craft beer. Come on Thursday night. We talk about bike.
I hate to admit this, but Colorado is home to the most micro distilleries in the U.S. We have over 40 or 50 micro distilleries, which is kind of like where craft beer and micro breweries were, 15 years ago. And so I've kind of been getting into the whiskey and the gin and stuff that they've been making here. And there's some really good ones here in Colorado. Of course, beer is delicious. I've got a couple of friends that own breweries, so
nice. Yeah, we're actually talking about the craft distillery. I guess the phenomenon that it's also happening here in Minnesota, and I think Jonah was talking about that we should instead of beer, one of these craft beer blabs, instead of talking about beer, we'll do a whiskey blab or something. Although we'll get a little sloppy towards the end of an hour of that. So
seriously, it'll be the slur and drool blab. But
yeah, well, I'll tell you, all of it's fascinating. It's just like racing. There's a process to it. There's different strategies to it. I mean, there's a lot of parallels between all three of these subjects that you could talk for hours and hours and hours.
Absolutely. Now, have you actually tried? You do race cyclocross? Have you tried racing?
I race cyclocross. Here's the problem. I'm coming out of a 10-year divorce of, what do you need when you've got 10 bikes, another bike? Well, most of my bikes have gone to my ex-wife. And so that's coming to an end here. And one of the first, I'm buying a fat tire bike and I'm buying a cross bike.
Nice.
And then I'll start racing. My son and I race triathlons together. We're sponsored by a clinical trial company in Wilmington, North Carolina. So we do a half Ironman every year, and we usually celebrate he was given a 50-50 chance of surviving 5 years. So at 15 years, we're pretty stoked. And so we always celebrate.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Right. Thank you. We always celebrate by doing a triathlon. And so our sponsor brings us out to the beach to Battleship out in Wilmington, and we do a half Ironman together every year. We ride on a tandem. I swim, he rides on the tandem with me, and then we run together. So
that's Awesome.
But cyclocross, and are there any tandem cyclocross bikes? I mean, that would be.
I actually have a Raleigh tandem that my wife and I ride on pretty regularly, and that is it's definitely more gravel set up. I mean, could you do cross with it? Absolutely, just because it does have heavier duty wheel set and thicker spoke. So is it possible? Yeah, I think believe it or not, the Raleigh tandems, I think it's called the Raleigh Pursuit. But
Okay.
I got that a number of years ago when I was working at a shop here in upstate, and I have actually ridden the bike on gravel. Obviously the stokers scared out of their wits, but it is a lot of fun.
Well, my son's not that smart, so he wouldn't know.
Yeah. Well, you're getting divorced, so you're actually in the clear. So I think I'd rather have my son on the tandem than never mind.
Right, gotcha. Hold it. That's for distillery night.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. See, now see, your point is like there's 7 days in the week, and now we're slowly starting to fill in each day of the week with a blab. Anyway, yeah. In fact, it was, if you saw me looking away, that was my wife signaling me. She's like, hey, how's it going? I'm like, yeah, you're right there.
Right.
But no, it's great to have you on the show, and again, for those of you just tuning in now, thank you for your time. As I said, this is Bike Chat with Anello Grande, aka Gunnar Soros, and Jonah DePasquale, and myself, and we are very thankful to have the folks from Rush Miller Foundation. They do have a new website coming up. They are online, as I said, but again, give them a few days to get themselves up and running. But a great establishment for a great cause. They're based out of Colorado, and as I said, doing their part to inspire others on two wheels, and clearly that's why we're all here this evening, because we are passionate about what we do and say and talk about. This particular subject has been cyclocross. As I said, if you're just tuning in now, certainly be sure to catch the replay, as we've covered a lot of key and helpful topics for those aspiring individuals out there looking to get involved in cyclocross.
Exactly. And I'm going to stop recording here just because I'm going to have to get off here in a second.
Yep.
But we can talk to